I'm delighted to be joined now by Patrick Hannon, who is the president of WorldDAB, and that's the organisation facilitating the global rollout of DAB. Hello, Patrick.
Good afternoon.
Patrick, you're going to be updating us on developments in DAB around the world and on the key initiatives that are helping to deliver the platform's international growth. So I think you've got a few slides to share with us, and then we'll have a chat.
So I think I've got 5 slides, and as you say, it's a quick international update. So here we go. The first thing to say, 2020, in spite of all our troubles, has actually been a good year for DAB. When we look at Europe in particular, there's really strong progress. Major markets continuing to expand. Germany most recently launched a second national multiplex in October of this year. France will have 10 cities on air by the end of the end of 2020, and is launching 2 national multiplexes in next summer. And then the third major market is Italy, who introduced regulation at the beginning of this year, which requires all receivers, both automotive and consumer, to have DAB+. And I'll talk a bit about that later on. So those are the major markets, but then we've also got the most advanced markets, and the first countries are now switching off FM. We have Norway, which I guess we all know about, switched off FM in 2017. Interesting to note that they achieved record radio listening in July 2020. And now we have Switzerland, who are planning to switch off between 2022 and 2023. So that's the direction of travel. Then we've got the EU. EU is supporting digital radio, especially in cars. And they introduced the European Electronic Communications Code 2 years ago now, nearly 2 years ago. And this requires all new car radios anywhere in the EU, they must be able to receive digital terrestrial radio. So that's when they're sold in new cars. That law takes effect 21st of December 2020, though in individual countries there are some delays due to COVID. Having said that, Germany, Italy, and the UK all have laws in place already, and those 3 countries alone account for 50% of all European car sales. And then finally, we have consumer receivers. So slightly different picture here. The EU decided that this should be a national decision, so any regulation needs to be done on a national basis. The first country to do so, as I mentioned at the start, is Italy. They require all consumer receivers to have DAB+. That law took effect in January of this year. And what you can see from this chart is what's happened to their sales figures. So in 2020, their sales have almost tripled year on year. In comparison, you can see that the other countries are, in the case of the UK, slightly down or growing in moderate numbers. So Italy has really made a significant impact. Other countries now are deciding if they're going to follow a similar path. And Eva, that's it. That was a brief summary. I will now hand back to you.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. There's clearly lots of activity and some interesting takeouts for us in the UK. So let's just talk about those for a little bit. Now, starting with the global rollout of DAB and DAB+ and how that's developing, the UK has always been the market leader and a pioneer in DAB. But now it's clearly fair to say that many other countries have joined us in adopting DAB, and even more are coming on board.
No, absolutely. I think, as you say, UK, Norway, Switzerland, and Australia, they were really sort of the pioneers. But that, what we've now clearly got is DAB and really DAB+ established as the European standard. Started with Germany in 2011, and then after that, it's just been dominoes falling as other countries have joined the party. And in the end, that's what was recognized by the European Union.
So you just told us that Norway switched off analog in 2017, and Switzerland is planning to switch off in 22-23, but this isn't the approach we're taking in the UK. So what are the key factors driving those markets to opt for a switchover policy?
Well, the key thing for any market is really two factors: the economics for the broadcasters and listener behavior, and really it's a balance between those two things. What we know, obviously, broadcasting on both FM and DAB, is not the most efficient way of doing things. You've got a dual cost. So that's an issue on the economic side. However, broadcasters are understandably cautious about switching off before the listeners are ready, and so that's a balance that people have to figure out for themselves. Really, I think one thing that's interesting, looking at Switzerland, they've been tracking a number of metrics. Many of those metrics are the same metrics as we use in the UK. But one I think is worth highlighting, and that's the number of people who rely solely on FM for their FM devices for their listening. And what they found is that, and these are figures from earlier this year, 15% of listeners, only 15% of listeners now are only using FM receivers. And that number has sort of fallen steadily over a number of years, and so they have that metric. When we look at the, just for comparison, in the UK, the equivalent figure at the end of 2019 would have been about 24%. So somewhat higher than the 15%, but it is coming down, because if you go back to the end of 2018, it was 29%. So we can see the direction of travel there, and. In the end, as I say, each individual country needs to make their own decisions. It is a judgment. There isn't one right answer, but it's clear that, as I say, first Norway and now Switzerland, think that this is a feasible and cost-effective option for them.
So the UK car market is already well advanced, and through our ongoing collaboration with automotive manufacturers, the percentage of new cars with DAB fitted as standard has increased from 4% to 94% over the last 10 years. And this, the new requirement that you've just talked about, will see this increase to virtually 100% of new cars in the UK. But how quickly will that transformation that took 10 years here now be in Europe?
Well, really interesting. I mean, the UK has absolutely led the way here, and credit to DR UK and the car makers themselves. What we've seen is that having made it possible in the UK, car makers in Europe 2 years ago, about 1/3 of new cars came with DAB as standard. That was in 2018. The figure already is up to 50%. So moving, the UK, it took 10 years to make that transition. The rest of Europe is moving more quickly. It's already moving more quickly, but with the regulation, that means that really by the end of next year, you are looking at 100% or close to 100% will have DAB as standard. I mean, I think if I sum it up, the regulation is actually accelerating a trend that was already in place, and that's a key takeaway. Have regulation that helps you build on the momentum that's already in the market.
Mm. And I think people are often surprised when they hear the percentage of radio sold that are still analog only. So what's the significance of the consumer receiver regulation in Europe?
Well, no, very, very interesting. You say surprised. In my case, shocked when I see those figures. It's true. Something like 2/3 of radio sold in Europe, in countries that have got DAB, 2/3 of them are still analog only. In the UK, the figure is about 50%, 50-50. But what I showed was the one country that has introduced legislation for all consumer receivers to have DAB+ is Italy, and it's completely transformed the market. As I say, they've more or less tripled their sales year on year. That was from a relatively low base, but the point is that legislation is working with a trend that is already in place, but is accelerating it. And as I say, it's up to individual countries now to decide whether they want to follow the same path. We know that conversations are taking place, certainly in Germany, certainly in Benelux regions. It's also a live issue here in the UK. So, and certainly as WorldDAB, we see absolute merit in, first of all, this legislation being introduced, but also for it to being introduced in a number of different countries at the same time, because that will make it easier for the manufacturers.
Thank you. Patrick, I think that's all we've got time for today, but it's been absolutely great talking to you, and thank you so much for giving us such an interesting tour of international progress.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.